Gaza. And for more on this story, we are joined by our correspondent Paula Steer, who's on the Israel-Gaza border. Paula, we've just recapped recent events. Now, you're there right now. Can you describe what's happening behind you?
Artillery is firing from here into Gaza. They are targeting cells where they believe Qassam rockets are being fired from. Throughout the night, another 4 Qassam rockets were fired against the area where I'm standing and speaking to you from. I'm along the southern Israel border with Gaza, and not far from me is the Sderot village. This has been the target of so many of those Qassam rockets fired from Gaza over recent months. The Israelis claim that some 600 Qassam rockets have fallen on southern Israel in the last 10 months since the Israeli forces evacuated the Gaza Strip. Now, in response to this Qassam firing, in the early hours of this morning, Thursday, Israeli tanks and bulldozers entered an unpopulated area of northern Gaza. Prior to entering, according to Palestinian sources, an Israeli airplane fired a missile on the Islamic University of Gaza. According to the Israelis, they targeted an unpopulated open area. Either way, what the Israelis have done is they've distributed thousands of leaflets from Israeli airplanes warning residents of northern Gaza villages to evacuate their homes as soon as possible. As they say, the Israelis will continue firing against areas where they believe those Qassam rockets are being launched from. Military sources say that in the coming hours, they expect thousands of Palestinians from the Beit Hanun village in northern Gaza to leave their homes.
And what about the abducted soldier, Paula? Do you have any more information as to how close Israeli troops are to finding him?
Well, Israeli troops, in fact, have found him, and they've identified the body. They believe that this, there I'm talking about the teenager who went missing on Sunday night. There are two issues that really are plaguing the Israeli government and the Israeli public at the moment. Now, the one is an 18-year-old teenager who went missing on Sunday night. The Israelis have confirmed a body that they found in the West Bank city of Ramallah to be that of the teenager. Now, the Popular Resistance Committee, an extremist militant group, has claimed responsibility for killing this teenager because they say, or in response to Israeli aggression. The second issue that is occupying the Israeli public mind and Israeli officials, it's a question you asked me, and that is in terms of this kidnapped soldier. The Israelis have no more information than they had this time yesterday, and that is that they believe that the soldier is being held somewhere in southern Gaza, hence the reason why the initial deployment of Israeli troops was to the south of Gaza. They believe that he's being held in the Khan Yunis refugee camp, a particularly populated area, very difficult to gain access to. The Israelis will need to rely quite heavily on local intelligence if indeed they are going to find the safe house where the soldier is being kept. At the same time, though, they are continuing with their diplomatic efforts, although they have said that they will not meet the renewed demands of the captors, and those are to release thousands of Palestinian women and minors who are being held in Israeli jails.
Now, in the latest reports, Paula, we've been hearing that Israeli troops have arrested some Hamas officials in the West Bank. What can you tell us?
Well, that's correct. That was an operation that was carried out in the early hours of this morning also, the early hours of Thursday. Now, the Israeli Defense Force has launched that widespread arrest operation, and they've detained more than 30 Hamas officials, including in them are lawmakers, parliamentarians, high-ranking Hamas leaders. The Hamas Deputy Prime Minister, Nasser al-Sher, has been arrested, as has the Labour Minister. Now, the Israelis have said that these arrests are to apply pressure on the Palestinian government to release the kidnapped soldier. That soldier has not been seen or heard from since Sunday morning when he went missing. The Hamas leaders have responded quite harshly. They have criticized this Israeli move, and they are calling on the international community and the United Nations to apply pressure to Israel to not go ahead with these countdown arrests.
Now, a question that is raised in my mind, Paula, and I'm sure our viewers as well, is there more to this offensive than just a rescue operation?
I'm sorry, if you could just repeat the question, I don't hear you so clearly.
Yes, Paula, I was just wondering, is there more to this than just a simple rescue operation?
Well, that is a question that many here are asking. But it does seem, at least if you listen to the comments being made by Israeli officials, that it's not in their interest to go back into Gaza. Ehud Olmert has said as much. He has said that they do not want to reoccupy Gaza. Really what they're intending to doing is going in for a shorter-term operation as possible, finding the soldier and bringing him back to Israel. The kidnapping of an Israeli soldier really touches the core and fiber of Israeli society. The last time that a soldier went missing was 12 years ago. So it's not in the Israeli interest to remain in Gaza, and they are receiving a lot of international condemnation for having gone back into the territory. This is also a territory that's unfamiliar to Israelis. They're going to be working in Palestinian villages and Palestinian towns where the local population is completely against them. Civilians themselves have been called upon to arm themselves as much as they can, and Israelis run the risk of causing civilian deaths. One of the reasons that the militant groups that have taken the soldier captive have given for the operation is because they say there was such a high number of civilian deaths in the last month, and those were civilian deaths that were caused by Israeli strikes on targeted, who they believe were people carrying out attacks in Israel. Now, just behind me, there's been a large blast, and people here are scurrying to see what's happened, but it seems as if a Qassam that was fired from Gaza has landed just here. And while I've been speaking to you, there has been an ongoing cannon fire. I think behind me there is some smoke that was caused by that Qassam rocket. So really the mood here is tense, and you get a very real sense of what it is like for people living along the border under the continuous barrage of these Qassam rockets.
Yes, we did hear that, Paula. Tell me, how are Palestinians and Israelis and indeed the rest of the world reacting to this?
Well, if we start with the Israelis, by and large, I would say it's 50-50, although it does tend to be that the majority of Israelis have supported the reoccupation of Gaza. Israelis are particularly concerned that this could lead to the death of more soldiers. In fact, the kidnapped soldier's father has gone on television and said that while he appreciates the Israeli operation, he is very concerned that no other soldier dies trying to save his son. The Palestinians, of course, are highly critical of this move, although there is one element in Palestinian society which has supported the kidnapping and are urging Hamas's militant wing, who has claimed responsibility for holding the soldier, not to hand the soldier over. They are the families of Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails, and they are really hoping that what they call an asset in Palestinian hands could lead to the release of their family members, many of whom have been in Israeli jails for years. The international community is walking a very tightrope. On the one hand, you had Israeli officials appealing to them to apply pressure to the Palestinian Authority to hand over the kidnapped soldier. The international community has condemned the kidnapping, saying that it cannot be agreed to or supported in any terms. At the same time, though, you've got Palestinian leaders, particularly the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, also urging the international community to apply pressure on Israel not to go ahead with a full, wide-scale incursion in Gaza that lasts several days, because it is clear this could lead or could result in the deaths of many civilians. So the international community, on the one hand, urging Israel to show restraint, on the other hand, urging the Palestinian Authority to hand over this kidnapped soldier. At this stage, though, it does seem as if the proposed talks between the Israeli Premier Ehud Olmert and the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas have been put on hold. There were high hopes that the peace negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis could be resumed in coming days. At least now the mood on the ground seems to suggest the opposite.
Well, Paula, we can clearly hear those blasts behind you there, and I'm sure we will return to you later in the programme for more on this story as it develops. So thank you to you for the moment. That was our correspondent Paula Sleer with the latest on developments in Gaza, and we